Must be union guys on a break. So, good afternoon. I looked at the schedule, I said, oh, I've got to talk right after lunch. I drew the short straw, as they say. I want to tell you how, first of all, grateful I am to be here. Originally, I believe it was supposed to be in March or April, I think, and then it was, obviously canceled. But I don't know, it's just perfect right now. It really is. This is wonderful. So my name, again, it's Father David Simonetti. I'm from the Archdiocese of Chicago. I'm only about 45 minutes away, straight down the expressway. And I am pastor. I've been pastor for 2 years. Everyone knows it as St. Florian Catholic Church. It was a Polish industrial area, sort of parish, but now that's changing. But we merged with 2 other parishes, so now there's just one parish, and it's called Christ Our Light Catholic Church. I just love the name, because, and our feast day is the Easter Vigil, or really Easter, because in darkness, those are the first things we proclaim and chant, Christ Our Light. So it's really great. Also, just a little bit about myself. So I was ordained at 38. I went in the seminary at 33. I used to be a teacher. Well, I am a teacher, but I used to be like a teacher. And I said, you know what, Lord, if I'm going to be upset, poor, I might as well get holy and just become a priest, doing it, if this is what it's going to be. So, but I tell people I took the scenic route there, but I got there. And the Lord works all these things out. And so I was ordained in 2005, so I'm in my 16th year. Look what they've done to me. My hair used to be jet black, everything. Liturgy committees. And what I've done is, as Sean shared with you, I really developed a tremendous, not only love for animals. Once I got one, I never had one. I had a goldfish in '77. I won at the St. Rocco Carnival, but that was really a sham. You took it home and he was bubbling up within a couple. Then the water was blue. I mean, come on. So anyhow, there was really nothing there. But as I got older, when I was my last parish, St. James in Sauk Village, I got my first dog, puppy, a beautiful little collie. And then within about 16 months, I had 3 dogs. I have a big, beautiful Newfoundland, 150 pounds. Looks like a bear. His name is Francis the Bear. He reminds me of me in 5th grade. I knew in 5th grade I'd never go to prom. And so that's what he kind of looks like. And then I got an Old English sheepdog, which I'll never do again because of the combing involved in it. And then when I went to my new parish, Christ Our Light, I added something that I added 3 peacocks. I have 3 peacocks. And you say, why? And maybe you don't say why, maybe you say, well, I don't care. Well, but I'm going to tell you, because you heard Jack talk about it earlier. I got to tell you, I'm getting so much out of today. That, first of all, Jeff this morning, and then, where is it? Jack, the chef. Yeah, his talk. When he said he got near that priest and he felt the same power that he did in that room and his knees buckled, I walked near him and I looked at his legs. They didn't buckle. I said, oh, what's wrong with me? I got no power. I got no juice. Maybe it's him. So, but anyhow, I got the peacocks because they are beautiful, capital B. And there are 3 traditional transcendental paths to God: truth, beauty, goodness. In today's culture, if you put up truth first, the walls go up immediately. But you can lure through beauty. And the beautiful peacocks in the middle of, I'm on the south edge of Chicago, and they've got I built them a magnificent aviary. It draws people to it because they're so beautiful in the midst of such industrial kind of blah. it's like a Garden of Eden there. And so I have either 7 fish or 12 fish. I can't tell. Every time I count them, they move. And so I can't get an accurate count. I have 2 parakeets. I had 3. One caught a draft. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? So I love animals. So as I was studying at Mundelein for 5 years, 2 years ago, I earned a doctorate degree, and my thesis was this. And it really came out of seeing the connections of animals and people and God and the saints, and something that lures us out of ourselves to care for the other. It's called Pet and Pray, the transforming power of grace and communion through God's beloved creatures. So how all creation, seen and unseen, is interconnected and interdependent through God. And St. Francis being the sign of the peaceable kingdom. So I just want to share that. Also, you saw in the back I have some spaghetti sauces and 1 Creole sauce. It's called Padre's Leg Kickin' Creole. If your legs don't kick, I'm a liar. And I started those. I called it communio because that's Latin for communion and community. So I took something I like to do, and there are 6 flavors, although the pizza Parmesan isn't here. And I took them, developed them, took them to a professional bottler, the same company that does Mike Dicka's jardinieres and things. So me and my Iron Mike are on the same team. And they follow my recipe. And if you look on the back of the bottle, the first ingredient actually says, what do you think it says? Tomatoes? Well, normally it would be, but it's, oh no, that's ragu. No, it says love. It says love. That's the first ingredient. Because I'm not selling spaghetti sauce, that's incidental. What is in that 24 ounces, I consider it a relationship delivery system. Relationship delivery system. The sauce is incidental. And the motto on it is, it's more than a meal, it's the way back home. And I told my mother, I put you on the label to make up for my 20s. She said, just the label? I said, well, it's a start, it's a start, it's a start. And I tell people when they buy a jar, keep one unopened. If I make Pope, it'll be worth something on eBay or something one day. But anyhow, so it's in a number of Northwest Indiana stores here. It's in some stores in Chicago. And I've given a little over 4 years, I've given $23,000 to the most local hand-to-mouth charities right here. The big, I also give to the, for example, I give to Sojourner Truth House, Abraham Ministries, Christian man who makes mobile carts for people who can't afford one, who can't walk. Mobility Ministries, it's called. It's a Christian group. I give to Mother Teresa's pantry over here in Gary. I give to the police department. It's called Get Behind the Vest to help them buy new vests. Things like that. So I don't get anything. There are no employees. There's no staff. It's my recipe. A professional factory makes it, and I put it myself in the car and bring it to the different stores and whatever, because I couldn't afford to do that. There'd be nothing left. So I give away about somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000 after the ingredients are paid for. So, and I just wanted to share that with you. Okay. I want to also compliment, before we really get into it, compliment the hospitality put on here today and everything. For me, a cup of coffee is really makes or breaks all things. And when I came in and saw the coffee pots and all that, St. Paul says everything is grace. Yeah, but grace plus coffee is it. I call that caffeinated grace. There's actual sanctifying caffeinated grace. At the hotel I woke up today, and with the COVID, everything is thrown off. So they had a sign. You can't, the restaurant's not open, but we're giving you a complimentary breakfast. Wonderful. So I got there, and there was like a pre-made bag, and I said, no, it's not hot. Maybe it's cooling down. I'm thinking big bagel, couple layers of everything. I get back to the room, I open it. There's a bag of sliced apples this big, and I looked at that apple. I've got trifocal. I held it up. I said, maybe I'm seeing it through the wrong piece of the lens. The cross section was about this big. I said, I think you picked this apple a little premature. I didn't even open it. I bring it home and put it in one of my mouse traps at home for the mice running through the directory. So, but to come here and see everything out and everyone's attitude, it's really lifting me up. I just wanted to give you that feedback. So today's talk is bearing fruit, authentic Christian fruit as a Christian man, as a Christian man. So you can't go wrong with looking at the Lord's own words, the vine and the branches. I will read this, just follow. So this is reading from the Gospel according to John. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He takes away every branch in me that does not bear fruit, and every one that does, he prunes, so that it bears more fruit. You are already pruned because of the word that I spoke to you. Remain in me, as I remain in you. Just as a branch cannot bear fruit on its own unless it remains on the vine, so neither can you unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever remains in me and I in him will bear much fruit, because without me you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me will be thrown out like a branch and wither. People will gather them and throw them into a fire, and they will be burned. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask for whatever you want, and it will be done for you. By this is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. As the Father loves me, so I also love you. Remain in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you, and your joy may be complete. This is my commandment: love one another as I love you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I no longer call you slaves, because a slave does not know what his master is doing. I have called you friends, because I have told you everything I have heard from my Father. It was not you who chose me, but I who chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit that will remain, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you. This is my command: love one another. The Gospel of the Lord. He is the most virile man I have ever met. He is the most virile man I have ever met. You know who said those words? Somebody very famous. Nancy Reagan. You know when she said those words? After she spent a day with Pope John Paul II, when he was working with President Ronald Reagan to ultimately, in his own words, shake the rotten tree of communism to bring it down. And he said that it was a rotten tree, and it was dying, and I just gave it a good shake. But Nancy Reagan, whose husband is President of the United States, the greatest leader in the world of the greatest country, and she met Pope John Paul for one afternoon, said he is the most virile man I have ever met. Now, virile or virility comes from the Latin virilitas. It's derived from the Latin vir, V-I-R, and it means man. And a definition is, it refers to a wide range of masculine characteristics viewed positively. It means marked by strength. Some of the adjectives for it are manly, masculine, which comes from the Latin masculus, which means man, strength, chivalrous, chivalry, brave, stout-hearted, heroic, daring, vigorous, and robust. Robust. It's also, in a secular way, associated with sexual potency. In other words, to be able to produce great progeny. Well, in this last sense, virility is to a man what we'd say fertility is to a woman. Now, Pope John Paul, he's a celibate. He was celibate his whole life. He's a saint. So where is his power? What is this power that she sees harnessed in him like the sun? His power lies in his, can anyone tell me the word? You don't lose anything if you get the wrong answer. His virtue. His virtue. Oh, you wanted to say that after I said it? All right, very good. Okay. Yeah, in his virtue. His chastity, according to his state in life, he was able to harness his passions, as he was saying earlier. He harnessed them from God. He was the greatest lover on earth. He harnessed them and then gave them out into what he calls the law of the gift. You can read that in George Weigel's biography. The law of the gift means as he receives it, he gives it away of his whole self, and to that level, he receives it more. And it's an endless conduit of giving and receiving, lover, beloved, and out to others. Now, we have many cultural ideas of what it means to be a man. These are shaped in a lot of ways, in the modern era with social communications. So, for example, if I said to you, in the 1950s, give me sort of just say a cultural model of a real man, 1950s. All right, I'll answer it myself. John Wayne. John Wayne. Although his name was Marion, the studio said, we better call him John. You know, John Wayne, right? John Wayne was always, punch you in the face. Okay, John, or shoot you. All right. In the 60s, I think of Steve McQueen, particularly in the movie Bullet, that prized car possession. In the 70s, I have to kind of think of Burt Reynolds, you know, the bandit. He was, or, you know, I hate to talk about this movie, but Deliverance. And when he said, I am the law, where is the law? And he had that, just those massive things. I mean, his hair was almost gone. In the next movie, he's got this full head of hair. But anyhow, but his muscles, that's where he was really just it. In the 1980s, arguably the greatest decade for guy movies, you had Sylvester Stallone, you had Arnold Schwarzenegger, Bruce Willis, you had Tom Selleck, who used to do the Chaps commercials. But in the 1990s, it started to shift. It started to shift. And it really came to the forefront, and I'm sure there was much behind the scenes, to demasculize or demasculinize what was portrayed in movies. The tough guy wasn't there anymore, which you've kind of got. It was a shift to the anti-masculine. Even now, if you look on TV, when they show a man in any kind of a show, he is always, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but he is always weak and buffoonish. Weak, buffoon. That's what they're putting forward. That's what they're putting forward. Now, I do a bit of Hispanic ministry, and I'm around it a lot, and cultures have different sort of expressions. Like, again, the area that I'm in now, it was really a Polish immigrant factory sort of, so a lot of this is influenced by the time and culture. but I've noticed in the Hispanic ministry too, some of the problems you see related to manhood is something they call machismo, which is, by definition, a strong or exaggerated sense of manliness. It's an attitude of domination and entitlement, and it's sort of just linked to be masculine. You have to have this power and the right to dominate. As a matter of fact, numerous men will have families back in Mexico and families here. I mean, a wife and kids, and sometimes they don't know that they have them in Mexico. And it comes out later, or I'll hear about it later. And it can be abusive and things. Well, all of these models, John Wayne, Steve McQueen, et cetera, they always have to be purified. How are they purified? Through the gospel. Well, what's the gospel? It's a person. Jesus. Our standard is not Sylvester Stallone, although he is great, and you know it. The standard, the model is Jesus Christ. In Gaudium et Spes, paragraph 22, it says, Jesus Christ reveals man to himself. Jesus Christ reveals man to himself. Jesus is the perfect man. Perfect man. Under that, I will lay you a wager for our example, we'll talk about him in a little bit, is St. Joseph. Because Jesus has God as his Father, but Father is Spirit. And God the Father knows that, and Jesus in his humanity, I'll quote Pope John Paul regarding Mary and by extension Joseph. She is not only his mother, Joseph is not only his foster father, but they are also his teachers. And Jesus learned how to be a man in the way that he could wrap his arms around from Joseph, the man par excellence. So, what we're seeing today is an anti-Christian, well, it really is anti-Christian, but even anti-human attack on males, masculinity, and the family, and fatherhood. So I was speaking last night with Jack. We were having a few libations, and the speakers and things, and he shared with me something great. Sister Lucia, the last surviving visionary from Fatima, she was doing, I think, an interview with somebody, Cardinal Navarra, and she said to him that in this final struggle, the greatest attack was going to come in this final struggle through the family, on the family. That's how, and I think Pope John Paul might have said, what communism couldn't do to the family, now remember what he grew up under, where the state wants to take the place of the father, and allegiance to the state, and even kids turn their parents in to the beast. John Paul said, what communism couldn't do, the sexual revolution is doing. Archbishop Sheen said about the sexual revolution, do you run through a red light and call that a revolution? The saints have the best lines because they have the best light. And Pope John Paul also said this in 1976. We are now facing the final confrontation between the gospel and the anti-gospel, between the church and the anti-church, between the word, capital W, and the anti-word, meaning antichrist. And we, again, the great saint prophet, we see it. And zeroing in is the family. So my local bishop, Joseph Perry, we were having a discussion and he told me this: the greatest pandemic today, worldwide pandemic, is not COVID. Can anyone tell me what it is? Thought I heard it. Moral confusion. That is the greatest pandemic today. And men and women are experiencing a even contrived and engineered crisis in identity. They don't know who they are. And they're being taught from the youngest ages now, you decide who you are. Even in baptisms and things, or birth certificates, there's a move to don't put down the sex. They'll decide later. I was having a dinner with Father Mitch Pacwa from EWTN. You know, are you familiar with him? I was on his show last year, and he's a big-time hunter. And anyhow, he said, I told the cook to prepare something special tonight. Well, now again, my favorite store is Rob's Chop and Deli in Dyer there. So I'm thinking maybe he went out and got some T-bones or boneless ribeyes. He said to me, how do you like your venison? Well, I don't. That's how I like my venison. I don't. I don't. But we were talking about this problem. He said when a man says, or especially a young boy, I feel like a woman, not a man. Mitch Pacwa's argument is, you don't know how a woman feels. You don't know that. And if a woman says, no, I really feel like I'm a man, you don't know how a man feels. And even if you went through all of those changes and everything, your DNA will never change. It's a man. Your DNA is a man. That will never change, you know. Taking pictures. And there's two T's at the end of my name. Very good. Okay. So, but anyhow, so do you see the crisis today? And again, it's being manipulated. God made us, and his talk was so beautiful as it helping me transition into this. Male and female, he created them. In other words, we are complementary. These are John Paul's words. We are complementary, but we're different. God made us that way. So, and if I'll use Cardinal George's words, he said, perhaps I shouldn't say this as Archbishop, but the parts fit together. And they bear fruit when they fit together. Left on its own, something will die off from its sterility, you know. And so male and female, and when you try, as Father Rich Simon says, when you try to steal divine fire, you will certainly get burned each and every time. And so, again, this attempt to flatten out the differences between men and women in terms of we're all the same. We are not the same. Even it's rooted into nature. We're male and female for a particular reason. So, and as far as the new category, the transgender business, Pope Benedict XVI, arguably one of the top three theologians, well, arguably the top theologian who's ever sat on the throne of Peter, Pope Benedict stated not too long ago as emeritus that the LBGT, what's on there now, Q, MOUSEY, Mickey Mouse, cut that in the transmission. I don't want anybody picketing in front of my house. But he said, that is from the devil. That is from the devil. Make no mistake. Now, there's a priest, I heard him say this, and you know what, you won't find it in the catechism, but it's certainly not against anything, and I personally believe it. So God made us as I'd love to keep pointing back to you, because later you have to show me how to cut onions, since you were a professional chef. I'm always getting cuts. So, but anyhow, as he beautifully said, male and female, he created them. Now, and with that, we're made in the image and likeness of God. Now, Jesus took on the human image. And God, here's what Pope John Paul taught. God the Father loves us with maternal love. God the Father loves us with maternal love. So what is best in man and woman, now biblical man means man and woman. So, but what is the great attributes at its height of man and woman together in its unity are something of God. That he contains both, and that's what Pope John Paul was trying to say in God the Father loves us with maternal love. And so, since we are made in God's image and likeness, but Jesus took on a man's body, okay, as a reflection of the Father. The church fathers speculate that Satan, or Lucifer, the highest angel, rebelled against God because the Word would become flesh, and he would not worship a man. And even more so, he would have a mother. And he, Lucifer, the greatest angel, would have to be under her in heavenly glory, and rebelled against that. So everything the devil does, everything, it's always to mock God and to negate anything God does. And so, since man was made in God's image and likeness, Satan is saying, I will recreate them in my image. What's his image? He has no body. Angels are asexual, right? They have no bodies. So in other words, they are not sexual beings. They have no sexuality, or they are not sexual beings, which makes up an absolute constituent part of us. So by him causing this confusion, where a young man or an older man, Bruce Jenner, whoever, says, no, I'm going to be a woman. In other words, or now on applications and things, they're even putting, you tell like an interviewer or your employer the preferred pronouns. So you call yourself whatever you want to, Mr., Mrs., tomorrow I may tell you to call me something else. So in other words, you're making yourself what they call fluid or non-gender. You hear that, non-gender? I went in to buy some eyeglass frames, and I was in St. John, and I came upon a store, and it looked like a nice store, like one of those art house kind of stores for glasses. And I went in and I asked the young guy, I said, where are the men's glasses? He said, we don't do that here. Everything is gender neutral. You have a good day. I don't want to look like my Aunt Frances. She's a lovely woman, but I don't want to look like my Aunt Frances. Where are the men's glasses? You know? So do you see that? You see how they're buying into that? So Satan is trying to cause the confusion of making you in his image and likeness, which is neither male nor female, nor can produce fruit. You see? So Pope John Paul wrote that divorce, these are his words, divorce, abortion, and contraception are, as it were, in a certain sense, an anti-Trinity. Divorce, abortion, and contraception are, in a certain sense, an anti-Trinity because they fail to give and receive life, you know. And Pope John Paul also wrote this, a priest who will not accept his celibacy in a certain, he loved to say that, in a certain sense, practices a contraceptive priesthood. A priest who will not accept his celibacy, not just white-knuckling it, you know, and then because then you could become like a dry alcoholic. You haven't gotten the counseling, or you haven't surrendered and become at peace with it, and you're just saying, well, I won't drink. Well, you just become very miserable, crudgety, and cranky, and you're white-knuckling it. And that doesn't bear fruit. So Pope John Paul's argument is, you will practice a contraceptive priesthood. So we live out our Christian vocation to be a man who bears fruit. Cardinal George told us when we were seminarians at Mundelein, if you cannot see yourself as a father, you have no business being a priest. He said, now that may not, if you get to ordination, you know, it may not be the Lord's call for you to be, a material father, like you all have kids, physical, material kids. But he's talking about relationship. relationship. If you can't see yourself being a father, in relationship as a father, you have no business being ordained a priest. Now, what's the vocation? You heard in the first talk, come. Well, that's a call, right? Come. But the word vocation comes from the Latin vocare. It's where we get the word vocal. It means to call. So what does the Lord call every man to? Now, according to your state in life, single, married, widowed, priest, etc. The vocation of all men is to be at service to those entrusted to your care. Me, I do it with my parishioners, obviously. And during the early stages of COVID, the diocese put together a team of priests who would go specifically to anoint COVID patients who were actively dying in the last day or two of their lives. Because a lot of the hospital chaplains, they have to see the other patients and they can't do that. So the bishop called me and he said, will you help us? I said, yes, I will. And when I was doing that, and you have all your gear on, but someone's dying and their mouth is open, they're breathing on you and all. And I was the Lord, the Father, running out for his son, really like the prodigal son, running out to his son. And while I was doing this, it really, really was a great gift to me because I saw, in case I doubted it, I saw that I was willing to lay down my life for a friend, and which was in our gospel today. No greater love than this. I was willing as a father to step into someone actively breathing on me with COVID, and I'm willing to exchange my life to give him the sacrament. And I'm not trying to be melodramatic, I'm serious. And it really, when I would go back to my rectory at night, and then, there's protocol and showers and everything, I would sit in my chapel before the Lord, and I would think about that, saying, I do love you enough and my priesthood enough to literally die for one of my parishioners. And these people I didn't know, these were not parishioners throughout the diocese. And so to be at service to those entrusted to your care. You who are fathers or grandfathers, I am sure you would literally lay down your life to protect your wife or your children. So what are some of the traits of a strong Catholic man? A strong Catholic man really is the last acceptable prejudice. That is, to get a young, strong Catholic man is the one that the media and culture try to destroy. So I'm just going to give you a few traits. Honest and trustworthy. Honest and trustworthy. In other words, well, who wants to marry a liar, right? I tell, teenage girls sometimes, start praying now for the person, if you think the Lord's calling you one day to be married, if you find that desire, pray now for the man you're probably a young boy, who's going to be your spouse. You wouldn't pray, Lord, give me a real scuzzo, right? Give me a real loser. Judge Judy would say, I love Judge Judy. I tell people, nobody gets in the kingdom on my back from 4 to 5 because Judge Judy's on. I said, certainly, you've held this in a long time. Just 1 more hour is not going to kill you. So I said, just love it. And I love when Judge Judy, there's always a young lady and a young guy she said, honey, we don't have courts for people who play house. You want to play house, get married. We don't have courts for you people. And she'll look at the guy and she'll say, honey, you look like a nice girl. See him? He's on his best behavior now. After you get married, his behavior doesn't get better. And you're in court. Get rid of him, she tells him. But anyway, back to this. Honest and trustworthy. Who wants a pastor they can't trust? Right? Who wants a pastor they can't trust? Who wants to be in business with a partner who is dishonest and they can't trust? So to be a good, strong Catholic man, you have to be honest and trustworthy. Say what you mean and do what you say. Humble, number 2. Actually, this should have been listed as number 1. This is the foundational building block of all the other virtues. Every saint is humble. Without humility, you cannot build on any of the other virtues. So, because what's the first listed capital sin? Pride. And capital sins, capitas is the Latin for head, always has an antidote to it. And the antidote to the first sin of pride is, which is the root of all the other sins, I will not obey, is humility. Good definition, humility comes from humus, which is Latin for from the dust, from the dirt, humus. Any of you gardeners, you know humus very well. And so a good definition of humility is this. It's not denying, if you can sing like an archangel, humility is not saying, no, I can't sing like that. No, that is not being humble. It's to acknowledge, yes, God has given me a gift, but to realize you're not the author of that gift. It is on loan to you. You are developing it as a good steward. For your use? Nope. For the good of others, for their listening pleasure, to lift them up. So it's being aware of my self-worth. That's humility. Being aware of my self-worth. I am worth something, and so are you, because God made you. But not my self-importance. They can't start this without me. I wasn't invited, etc., etc., etc. So humility. Now, we also heard about this morning from our first speaker. The strong Catholic man loves with agape love. He loves sacrificially. Love must be tested. It must be tested. And so Jesus, it tells us in John, and having loved his own, he loved them to the end. So he works hard. He works hard, pouring out his own life in a factory, in a sacristy, in his law office, wherever, on the garbage truck, wherever. He works hard to provide for those entrusted to his care. Okay. Fourth, he is self-disciplined and has control of his passions. I had told you earlier, Pope John Paul's power as a celibate was that he harnessed and corralled the passions that are natural to man. His ability and desire for union, which is ultimately union with God, he was able to control them, And he does not use people for pleasure or gain. He looks out for the greater good of others, and he is fully free and not enslaved to his passions. When I was driving down here yesterday afternoon from Chicago, I saw a billboard on the left side of the road. I was coming, east, left side of the road, huge billboard. And there was a lion's head with his mouth open. And it said, Lion's Den, Adult Superstore, exit something something. Lion's Den, superstore, not just store, superstore. Now, you had said a couple times in your talk St. Peter's words, and I think the first reader had spoken of St. Peter's words. The devil roars about like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. The audacity to call this lion's den, right in here, just to let you know, you are willingly walking into the lion's den. Okay. Proverbs 28. A man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. Very, very important. Fifth, he surrounds himself with other strong Catholic men who support him to live out his vocation and vice versa. Isn't that what you're all doing here today? And the support you're giving me? Now, I quoted the Bible. I like movies quite a bit. Let me quote that great theologian Rocky Balboa. If you hang out with coconuts, you're going to act like a coconut, right? That's real simple. Anybody, you don't need a degree from such and such you for that one. Hey, you hang out with coconuts, you're going to act like a coconut. You need to hang out with strong Catholic men who can support you and vice versa in your own vocation. Okay. Also obedient to those in authority over them. Ultimately, the law of God and just authority over you, provided it's not unjust. What did St. Joseph do? He fulfilled the law of God, and when Caesar called a census for his own grandeur, you know, his wife is going to deliver real soon. And yet, you know, he didn't hide from the census man. He took Mary and he went back to his own hometown of Bethlehem, causing them much, well, you know the story, causing that great difficulty. And yet he was obedient to those who are in authority over him, you know. Now, if those leaders are obedient to God or not, in the words of Mother Teresa, that's between them and God, you know. But the Lord expects me to be obedient, provided it's not, you know, unjust. Okay. 7, works hard at all he does. Jesus was, I'll lay you a wager, an excellent tradesman. Carpenter, see, we say carpenter, but it was so much more than that. It was carpenter, tradesman, mason. And the great story Jesus tells about the men who go out in the morning to stand in the marketplace looking for work. It's true. That's what they would do. They would take their skilled, whatever their tools were that they were skilled at, they would go stand in the marketplace. Now, at the same time, Herod was rebuilding the temple. Well, he probably needed great skilled laborers for that. I mean, that's just the context of when they were in. And they would stand there, they'd start early in the morning, and a foreman would come around and literally see what your skill was, and he'd hire you at different hours through the day. Now, because of the weather, crops had to be brought in right on time. Think of their time period. They could not wait. So when the crops had to come in, they had to come in. So they would go out till even all hours of the night looking for workers. And that's where that gospel story of the people who are called at the last hour. Well, Jesus was speaking to real people. So you can bet, if you go to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, it says, Jesus, although he is God, in his humanity, still, as God, he is infinite. But as man, he is finite. He doesn't know Spanish or whatever. He had to learn. There's a great statue, or there was, of St. Joseph and Jesus as a young boy. It was outside of Loyola College Seminary in Chicago, and it had Joseph in the Jewish shawls, and Jesus with the Psalms open, and Joseph was teaching him how to pray. Jesus, the author of the Word, author of all speech, in his humanity, had to learn how to do this. And that requires a teacher. And you can bet St. Joseph taught him there was no Black & Deckers with extension cords and rechargeable, how to lathe a door. And you can bet because Joseph was a just man, you can bet Jesus paid outstanding attention to detail. So he works hard to the best of his ability at all that he does. And lastly, but this is certainly not last on the list, he is firm. You heard that earlier, stand firm. He is firm and consistent in his prayer and in his relationship with God. Studies have shown this. A father's religious practices influence the kids far more, and there's a certain percent, far more than the mother's religious practices. They did a great study of mothers who, taking all different levels, mothers who went to Mass with the fathers, mothers alone, fathers not at all, fathers occasionally, all across the board, what the father, in the majority of cases, does if he goes to Mass regularly and worships, prays in the home, etc., that's what the kids will model. Okay, so we need a model for our Christian Catholic maleness. You know, how to bear fruit as a man. Children resemble their parents. You look like your parents? Yeah. I mean, you can get a DNA test if you're really questioning it. But children resemble their parents. Who do we need to resemble? Saint Joseph. We need to resemble Saint Joseph. Gentleman, protector, provider, defender, warrior, and lover. Lover. Archbishop Sheen, I think he's, what is he, servant of God now? Sheen? He'd go forward, but I don't know, they're fighting over his body. I think New York wants a leg, Peoria wants a wing, somebody wants an arm, whatever, and it's holding up his cause. God forgive us, you know. But he said there were no two people more madly in love with each other than Joseph and Mary. Jesus watched that, grew up with that, learned about that. He learned how to be a perfect man in his humanity from St. Joseph. Now, not in his divinity, but in Jesus' human nature, he is like us in all things but sin. Jesus has a human nature, he has a divine nature. He has a human soul, so your spirit. So when in the Eucharist, Jesus is present, truly present. Body, blood, human soul, and divine person. In a sense, the Trinity has a body in it now, you know. And so in his physical, emotional, psychological needs, Joseph cared for that. Jesus' human growth and development, Pope John Paul said, and it was Joseph's job to teach Jesus a trade. A trade. Okay. The Gospel of Luke said the child, capital C, child, grew up and became strong, filled with wisdom, and the favor of God was upon him. Okay. St. Joseph is again chaste. He is chaste. We're all to practice chastity according to our state in life. Remember Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure of heart, for they will see God." It is said that St. Joseph's, you know, the lily you picture him with, there is an apocrypha. It's not a canon of Scripture, but still it's in the apocryphal sort of tradition that Mary was presented with, I'm not saying this is true, I'm just saying it's there, that when the men were there that were possible husbands, remember they're clans, it's not like here, they're clans, it's tribal, they're Eastern, they're clans, but possible suitors. Joseph had a staff, and it says lilies came from that staff. I don't know. Anyhow, but they say the lilies for him are his sword. You had that sword? The lilies are a sword against filth. His lilies were a sword against filth. Now we see in pictures of St. Joseph that he's like an old man. Well, Mother Angelica just got to love her. She had a real simple down-to-earth thing. She said, well, I don't know. Old men don't walk all the way to Egypt. You know, old men don't fight off people and defend and protect. And old men don't walk from here to when Elizabeth, her house was in Ain Karin, which is about 70 miles away. She said, old men don't accompany their wives, 70 miles. He was probably a young, strong, carpenter man. So he is chaste. He is also a courageous defender. He always defended the child, capital C, and Mary, his wife, from threats. When he was told to go to Egypt, if you look at the geographical routes that they had at their options at that time, from what we'd say is first century Palestine, those roads were filled with thieves, robbers, marauders at every turn. They were going into Egypt. a land of Canaanites, a land of pagans, a land of cult worshipers, really devil worshipers, who were doing killing children and everything else. Joseph, most likely, don't know this, he doesn't know their language, he doesn't have work. The Lord told him to go, so he went, and he come out of the boat, come. And Joseph came, he went. But again, God doesn't send St. Michael to, appear and defend them. Joseph would have had to have been the protector and defender, in a sense, a sacramental sign of God's protection over Mary and the child. So and you can bet that, I'm sure that happened. He was a provider. He worked hard as a humble laborer. He didn't say, boy, my son is special, my wife's pretty special, they're in God's plan, God spoke to me himself, so I'm just going to sit back, God will provide. That is what we call presumption. Joseph relied on God's providence to put the work in front of him. Now, it's also a free act, like grace and our response. He also went out and looked for work, and what came up, he accepted that, and he did his due diligence, and he worked to provide. As a provider, I want to say this, if you think about this, when the Magi came to the baby Jesus with their gifts, you remember what those gifts were? Frankincense, myrrh, and gold. Real expensive gifts that you would give a king. It doesn't say doesn't say what he did with those gifts, but what happens immediately after that? He is told to flee into Egypt, and I'll tell you when to come back. Researching the historical Herod of that time from extra biblical sources, from particularly Tacitus and Josephus, who was not a Christian, but he was a historian. Herod at that point, shifting the calendar a little bit, probably lived at least 2 more years, 2 to 3 years after that incident. So Joseph and Mary and Jesus were probably in Egypt. And remember what he says? Kill the children, how many years and younger? 2 years and younger. So they weren't there for 2 weeks. They were probably in Egypt a couple of years. And it's just speculation, but he may have taken the gifts given to them as God's gift, God knowing, okay, now he has to leave, and help provide for his wife and child till he could get settled and work and figure out his way, just like immigrants who come today do. He is also just. The scriptures say that. Joseph is just. When we say justice, what do we mean? Justice biblically is right relationship. He is in right relationship with God and his neighbor. He loves God and his neighbor. A good definition, theological definition of justice is, according to Aquinas, to give each their due. To give each their due. Now, it doesn't say just to give to each. No, to give them their due. What is their due? To give them the opportunity to do for themselves. That's true justice. To provide the opportunity for you to be responsible for yourself. Joseph was just, and he fulfilled the divine will in charity. Okay. I just wanted to say this in closing. It's never too late. It's never too late. Do you know who G.K. Chesterton is? Have you heard of him? The English love their initials. G.K. Chesterton, T.S. Eliot, and so on and so forth. G.K. Chesterton said he was not Catholic. He converted to Catholicism. He said, I always wanted to belong to a church that was always beginning again. And so he found the sacrament of confession in the Catholic Church too good to be true. And he became Catholic. So in other words, we can always, with the Lord, begin again. A priest who maybe was a drunkard, not that priests drink, a priest who maybe was a drunkard and fell under weaknesses